The autumn rain hammered against the tall windows of the Kensington Club as I rushed through the service entrance, my maid's uniform already damp at the shoulders. My fingers fumbled with the buttons of my coat. My cheeks flushed from the long subway ride from Queens, followed by a breathless 3-block sprint from the nearest station. I was already 15 minutes late for my shift. "Carolyn, where have you been?" Mrs. Pemberton, the head housekeeper, hissed as I hurried down the marble corridor, adjusting my white apron and smoothing my hair beneath the regulation headpiece. Her normally composed face was tight with anxiety, her mouth pressed into a thin line. "The VIP lounge. You're serving tonight," Mr. Ashford called in. "Family emergency." "What? But I've never worked the VIP section," I protested, my hands trembling as I checked that my uniform was properly pressed, my apron strings tied correctly. Mrs. Pemberton gripped my wrist, her fingers cold and firm. "Listen to me very carefully, Carolyn. Tonight's guests are extremely important. Extremely. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not linger. Do not make mistakes." The warning in her voice made my breath catch in my throat. I nodded, tucking a stray strand of brown hair back into my bun and squaring my shoulders. I needed this job desperately. It was October 15th, 2023. 3 days ago, I'd turned 24, marking the occasion alone with Jeffrey over takeout Chinese food and a grocery store cupcake with a single candle. 2 years and 3 months ago, in July 2021, my parents had died in a car accident on the Taconic Parkway. I'd been 21 then, just months from my 22nd birthday in October, suddenly alone with Jeffrey, who'd been 10 years old, 5 months from turning 11 that December. My brother was 12 now, would turn 13 in 2 months if he made it that long. His restrictive cardiomyopathy was worsening faster than the doctors had predicted. I'd worked 3 jobs for 18 months after their deaths, cleaning offices at night, waitressing during the day, retail on weekends, anything to keep us afloat in our cramped 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, where I slept on a pull-out couch, and Jeffrey had the bedroom. By January 2023, I'd been on the verge of complete collapse, running on 3 hours of sleep and endless coffee, watching Jeffrey get weaker while I got more desperate. Then in February 2023, 8 months ago, I'd finally landed this position at the Kensington Club. Better pay, actual benefits. The employee health insurance kicked in after 90 days for me. But family coverage required a full year of employment. 4 more months. February 2024. That was the target, the finish line I was sprinting toward. Except Jeffrey's heart wouldn't wait until February. His previous cardiologist had him on basic medications, low-dose beta blockers, minimal diuretics that weren't helping much anymore. The arrhythmias were getting worse, more frequent, more dangerous. The $180,000 surgery wasn't covered by the emergency Medicaid. We'd been denied our combined income was exactly $127 above the qualification threshold. I'd appealed twice, been denied twice. At least we're both U.S. citizens, born here in New York, no immigration complications to add to the nightmare of hospital paperwork and insurance denials. Small mercies. We were out of options and running out of time. "Who are they?" I asked, clutching the silver tray Mrs. Pemberton thrust into my hands. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, then back to me. "Associates of Mr. Milani." My stomach dropped. Everyone who worked at the Kensington knew about Hermes Milani, though few had ever seen him. The whispers in the staff locker room painted a picture. Sicilian family, controlled the waterfront, owned politicians and judges, the kind of man whose name alone could make grown men look over their shoulders. Some said he was just a successful import-export businessman. Others claimed he was the reason bodies occasionally washed up in the East River. They're in the Lancaster Lounge, the private one. Mrs. Pemberton straightened my collar with sharp, efficient movements. "Remember, Carolyn, professional, efficient, invisible." Invisible. That word again. It had become my mantra since my parents' death. Keep your head down. Blend into the wallpaper. Become the help that nobody really sees or remembers. Survival through invisibility. I took a steadying breath and pushed through the staff door into the main corridor. The Kensington Club gleamed with old money and older privilege crystal sconces casting warm light on mahogany paneling, Persian rugs muffling footsteps, oil paintings of 19th century robber barons watching from gilded frames. It was the kind of place where fortunes were made and destroyed over brandy and cigars, where power brokers met in leather chairs to divide the city like a chessboard. I moved through the main lounge, spine straight, chin level, steps measured and silent the way I'd been trained. Past the trophy room, down the east hallway to the Lancaster Lounge reserved for the club's most exclusive members. I paused outside the heavy oak door, my heart hammering against my ribs hard enough to hurt. Then I knocked twice, softly, and entered. The Lancaster Lounge was darker than the main rooms, the lighting amber and intimate. A massive fireplace crackled at one end, casting dancing shadows across leather furniture and dark wood. 5 men sat in burgundy armchairs arranged in a loose semicircle, crystal tumblers of what looked like very expensive whiskey catching the firelight. Their conversation stopped the moment I entered, and 5 sets of eyes turned toward me with varying degrees of interest and assessment, but only one gaze locked onto mine and held it like a physical touch. He sat in the center chair. Though calling any of them center felt wrong, it was more that the room had organized itself around him, gravity bending to his presence. Dark hair swept back from his forehead, a closely trimmed beard framing a jaw that could have been carved from Sicilian marble. A black suit that wasn't just tailored but architectural, fitted to broad shoulders, and a lean frame, with the precision of someone who understood that appearance was armor. And ink, I could see the edge of tattoos at his collar, disappearing beneath the crisp white shirt. Dark lines that hinted at symbols I didn't want to understand. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Dark brown, almost black in the low light, intelligent and assessing and utterly, terrifyingly cold. He looked younger than I'd expected, mid-30s perhaps, but he carried himself with the absolute confidence of someone who'd never been told no and meant it. I dropped my gaze immediately, feeling heat flood my neck and cheeks. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Carolyn, and I'll be attending to you this evening. May I bring you anything to start?" I moved around the semicircle of chairs, keeping my eyes on my small notepad, taking drink orders in my neatest handwriting. Scotch, neat, bourbon, 2 fingers, another scotch, grappa. The requests came in low voices, some accented, some not. I was hyper-aware of the central man's gaze following me, tracking my movements the way a predator tracks prey, not aggressive, just aware, waiting. When I reached him last, he didn't immediately answer my question. Instead, he studied me for a long, uncomfortable moment, his head tilted very slightly to one side. "You're new," he said, not a question. A statement delivered in a voice like dark honey, smooth and rich with the barest hint of an Italian accent threading through the English. "I haven't seen you before." "Yes, sir. 8 months," I replied, pen hovering over my notepad, not quite meeting his eyes. My hands wanted to shake. I willed them still. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face, gone before I could be certain I'd seen it. Bourbon. Neat. The Pappy Van Winkle. If Pemberton hasn't hidden all of it. I nodded and turned to leave, desperate to escape the weight of his attention, when the door opened behind me. A man in a dark suit, security, clearly, from the way he moved and the barely concealed bulk under his jacket, entered, nodding respectfully to the group before approaching the central man. He bent down and whispered something in his ear, too quiet for me to hear. The man's expression didn't change, not even a flicker, but something in his posture shifted, a tension settling across those broad shoulders, a tightening around his eyes. Whatever the news was, it wasn't good. I slipped out into the hallway, closing the door softly behind me and releasing a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Something about that room, about him, made the air feel thicker, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. My uniform felt too tight, my skin too warm. I hurried back to the service bar to place the drink orders, my mind still trapped in that amber-lit room with those cold, assessing eyes. The bartender, Salvio, raised an eyebrow as he reached for the expensive bourbon. "Lancaster Lounge? You drew the short straw tonight, Caro." "Something like that," I muttered, watching him pour with practiced precision. "Word to the wise, keep your head down in there. Milani's crew doesn't tolerate mistakes." Salvio arranged the glasses on my tray with careful symmetry. "And whatever you do, don't look him directly in the eye. Predators take that as a challenge." Too late for that advice. I'd already locked eyes with Hermes Milani, and the memory of that dark gaze made my stomach flip with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Fear. Certainly, but something else too. Something dangerous. When I returned 10 minutes later with the tray of crystal tumblers arranged just so, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The casual ease had vanished, replaced by something harder, more focused. The men sat forward in their chairs, voices low and intense, papers spread across the coffee table between them, documents that looked official, maps, photographs. This wasn't a social gathering, this was business, the dangerous kind. I distributed the drinks with mechanical efficiency, trying to make myself as unobtrusive as humanly possible. As I set the Pappy Van Winkle bourbon in front of the central man Milani, it had to be him. My phone vibrated insistently in my apron pocket. I never took personal calls during shifts. Mrs. Pemberton would fire me on the spot, but Jeffrey's school had my emergency contact information, and his doctors had been worried about his most recent cardiology appointment just last week. The arrhythmias were getting worse, they'd said. He might need the surgery sooner than they'd hoped. Much sooner. After placing the last drink, I took 2 careful steps back toward the wall, into the shadows where the firelight didn't quite reach, and glanced at my phone screen with trembling fingers. Jeffrey, P.S. 234, urgent. My heart stopped, then restarted, hammering. I glanced at the men. They were absorbed in their discussion, voices rising and falling in English and what sounded like Italian, gesturing at the papers between them. They wouldn't notice. I could be quick. I pressed accept and brought the phone to my ear, turning slightly toward the wall. The words came automatically in the Sicilian dialect of my childhood, not quite standard Italian, the language that marked my parents as from Palermo, that separated us from other Italian immigrants. Chi è? Jeffrey Stabonu? Who is this? Is Jeffrey okay? The school nurse's voice came through in English, apologetic and worried. Jeffrey had collapsed during PE class, conscious now, but his heart rate was erratic, dangerously fast. They'd called an ambulance. He was being transported to Street Vincent's hospital. I should come immediately. Quanto grave? Hiu a venere ora? How serious? Do I need to come now? My Sicilian thickened with fear, the dialect I only spoke with my parents, words I hadn't used since they died. Very serious, she said. Yes, come now. They think it's his heart. I closed my eyes, my free hand pressed against the paneled wall to steady myself, my whole world narrowing to a single point of terror. Not Jeffrey. Please, not Jeffrey. He was all I had left. The only family, the only person in the world who still knew me as something more than invisible help. I ended the call, blinking hard against the sting of tears, and slipped the phone back into my pocket with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. When I opened my eyes and turned back toward the room, I found complete, absolute silence. 5 men staring at me. No 4 men glancing between me and their leader, uncertain. And 1 man, him staring at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness, and something very close to fear. His dark eyes had changed, no longer cold, but sharp, calculating, focused. His head tilted slightly, the way a wolf tilts its head when it's caught an unexpected scent on the wind. He looked at me like he was seeing me, really seeing me for the first time. Not a maid in a uniform, something else entirely. I realized with a sinking, terrible certainty that I'd just spoken Sicilian in front of them. Not standard Italian that any language learner might know, but the old Palermo dialect. The language that marked me as not just Italian-American, but specifically Sicilian, the language of my blood, my family, my father's world before he came to America. I apologize for the interruption, I stammered, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. My face was burning. Would you gentlemen like to order dinner now? Or, what's your name? The central man's voice cut through my words like a blade, not loud, but absolutely commanding. Every other sound in the room seemed to fade. Carolyn, sir. Carolyn Howie. Howie. He repeated it slowly, as if testing the weight of it. His eyes never left my face. But you speak Sicilian, the Palermo dialect, unless I'm mistaken. My mouth had gone dry. My parents immigrated, from Sicily, before I was born. And the phone call? He leaned back in his chair, one hand curled around his bourbon glass, the picture of casual interest. But there was nothing casual about the way he watched me. It sounded urgent. Family emergency? I shouldn't answer. Mrs. Pemberton's warnings echoed in my head, do not speak unless spoken to, but this was being spoken to, and refusing to answer a direct question from a man like this seemed infinitely more dangerous than breaking protocol. My brother, sir, he's 12. He has. I swallowed hard. He has a heart condition. The school called. I need to. I should go to the hospital. For a long moment, he said nothing, just studied me with those dark, unreadable eyes, while the firelight cast shifting shadows across his face. The other men had gone still, watching the exchange with the alertness of people who understood they were witnessing something significant but didn't yet know what. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Luca, he said, not looking away from me, and one of the other men, barrel-chested, with iron-gray hair, and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow straightened immediately. See that Miss Howie gets to Street Vincent's. Take the car. Make sure the doctors understand she's a priority. I blinked, stunned. Sir, I can't. I'm working. Mrs. Pemberton will. I'll speak with Pemberton. He waved his hand dismissively. Like my job. My supervisor. The entire structure of my employment was an inconvenient detail he could sweep aside with a gesture. Your brother is ill. You should go to him. Luca will drive you. The gray-haired man, Luca, was already standing, reaching for his coat draped over the back of his chair. The other men exchanged glances I couldn't interpret. A silent communication that spoke of years working together, understanding unspoken hierarchies and commands. I didn't know what to say. Thank you felt inadequate. Refusing felt impossible. Thank you, sir. What's your brother's name? The question caught me off guard. Jeffrey, sir. He nodded once, decisively, and finally looked away from me, back to the papers on the table. Go. We'll finish here. I fled. There was no other word for it. I hurried out of the Lancaster lounge on shaking legs, Luca following at a respectful distance, my mind spinning with confusion and fear, and a creeping awareness that something had just changed. Something fundamental and irreversible. I'd been seen, really, truly seen, by exactly the wrong person, or perhaps, somehow, exactly the right one. As we reached the main corridor, I saw Mrs. Pemberton speaking intensely with another man in a dark suit near the staff entrance, her face pale. When she saw me, she hurried over, intercepting us before we could reach the door. Carolyn, Mr. Milani called the club manager directly. Her voice was strained, confused. You're to have the rest of the evening off. His driver will take you wherever you need to go. She gripped my arm, her eyes searching my face. Your position here is secure, he was very clear about that. But what did you say to him? What happened in that room? I glanced at Luca, who stood impassive, waiting with the patience of someone accustomed to not asking questions. He overheard me speak Sicilian. My brother is sick. He's being kind. Kind, Mrs. Pemberton repeated the word like it was foreign, like she'd never heard it associated with Hermes Milani before. Men like that aren't kind without reason, dear. Be careful. But there was no time for caution. Jeffrey was in an ambulance, his heart failing, and I needed to be with him. Luca guided me through the service entrance to where a sleek black Mercedes idled at the curb, rain still hammering the pavement. Another man in a dark suit opened the rear door for me, his face professionally blank. I slid into leather seats that probably cost more than my monthly rent, my damp uniform leaving marks I hoped wouldn't be noticed. Luca climbed into the front passenger seat, saying something in rapid Italian to the driver instructions, coordinates, urgency understood. The car pulled smoothly into Manhattan traffic, moving with the kind of confidence that suggested traffic laws were more suggestions than rules. Street Vincent's, correct? Luca asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for such a hard-looking man. Yes, the pediatric emergency department. My voice sounded distant, strange. He nodded and spoke again to the driver, then turned slightly in his seat. The boss was briefed on your situation earlier today. Your brother's condition. He understands what's at stake. The implication was clear. Hermes hadn't just overheard a random phone call. He'd already known about Jeffrey, about the heart condition, probably about the impossible cost of the surgery. He'd been watching me, watching us longer than I'd realized. The drive felt both endless and too short. We moved through the city as evening descended, streetlights beginning to glow, the October rain turning everything slick and reflective. My phone buzzed with updates from the hospital. Jeffrey had arrived, was being evaluated, vitals being taken. Each message made my heart clench tighter. When we pulled up to Street Vincent's emergency entrance, Luca was out of the car before I could reach for the door handle, opening it for me with a small nod. Go. We'll wait. You don't have to. We'll wait, he repeated, and something in his tone made it clear this wasn't negotiable. This was an order from Hermes Milani, and orders from the boss were followed to the letter. I hurried through the sliding doors into the harsh fluorescent brightness of the emergency department, giving Jeffrey's name to the intake nurse with trembling urgency. She directed me to the pediatric wing, 3rd floor, and I took the stairs because waiting for an elevator felt impossible. I found Jeffrey in a curtained bay, small and pale against white sheets, wires connecting him to beeping monitors that showed his heart rhythm in jagged green lines. But his eyes were open, and when he saw me, he tried to smile. Hey, Caro, sorry about the drama. I dropped into the chair beside his bed, taking his hand carefully, avoiding the IV line taped to the back of it. Don't apologize. What happened? Running laps in gym. Just got dizzy and then I woke up in the ambulance. He shrugged, trying for nonchalance. But I could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear that had been growing there for months as his condition worsened. They said my heart did something weird. The rhythm went crazy. A doctor appeared young, competent-looking, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a name tag that read Dr. Ashwin Kapadia, Pediatric Cardiology. Miss Howie? I'm Dr. Kapadia. Your brother had what we call a syncopal episode. He fainted due to an irregular heart rhythm called ventricular tachycardia. Given his underlying restrictive cardiomyopathy, this is very concerning. We're running tests now, but I have to be honest, he needs that surgery sooner rather than later. His condition is deteriorating faster than we'd hoped. The words hit me like physical blows. Sooner. Deteriorating. Words I'd been dreading for months. How soon? My voice sounded distant, strange. Ideally, within the next 4 to 6 weeks, without intervention. Dr. Kapadia's expression was sympathetic but direct. His quality of life will continue to decline rapidly, and there's significant risk of sudden cardiac death. We're admitting him for 48 hours of observation. We need to stabilize him on a new medication protocol and monitor his rhythm closely. Jeffrey's hand tightened in mine. I forced myself to smile at him, to look calm when inside I was screaming. We'll figure it out, buddy. We always do. But I had no idea how. The surgery cost $180,000. I had $3,847 in my savings account. The math was impossible. Cruel. Final. Dr. Kapadia continued explaining new medications, higher doses of beta blockers, adding an ACE inhibitor and a more aggressive diuretic. Jeffrey's previous regimen had been too conservative, too cautious for how rapidly his condition was progressing. They needed to optimize his cardiac function before surgery, but they couldn't wait long. The window was narrow and closing fast. I nodded along, trying to absorb medical terminology, while my mind raced with financial impossibilities. Beta blockers to slow his heart rate, ACE inhibitors to reduce the strain on his heart muscle, diuretics to prevent fluid buildup. A complex medication schedule that would need to be followed precisely. I'm prescribing a pulse oximeter and blood pressure monitor for home use, Dr. Kapadia said, making notes on his tablet. You'll need to check his vitals twice daily and log them in an app my team will monitor remotely. Any concerning readings: heart rate above 110 at rest, systolic blood pressure below 90, oxygen saturation below 95%. You call immediately. I stayed with Jeffrey through the night, dozing in the uncomfortable plastic chair while nurses came and went, checking monitors, adjusting IV lines, speaking in hushed voices about rhythms and medications I didn't fully understand. Around 6 a.m., a charge nurse gently suggested I go home, shower, get some rest. Jeffrey was sleeping peacefully, she assured me, stabilized on the new protocol, and I'd be no good to him if I collapsed from exhaustion. She was right, of course, though leaving him felt like tearing off a limb. I rode the elevator down to the main entrance, exhaustion making everything feel distant and dreamlike. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming in weak autumn sunlight. I pulled out my phone to call an Uber, then remembered with a jolt Luca had said they'd wait. Surely he hadn't meant all night. But as I pushed through the hospital doors, I saw the black Mercedes still parked at the curb. Luca leaning against the hood with a paper coffee cup in hand, looking as alert as he had 12 hours ago. When he saw me, he straightened, dropping the cup in a nearby trash can. Miss Howie, your brother? Stable. They're keeping him for 2 days of observation. My voice was hoarse from disuse and unshed tears. He nodded and opened the rear door. Come, I'll take you home. I should have refused. Should have insisted on finding my own way back to Queens. But I was too tired, too wrung out, too overwhelmed to do anything but accept. The drive was quiet. Luca seemed to understand I didn't want conversation, didn't want questions or sympathy, just silence. When we pulled up to my building, 5 stories of aging brick with a bodega on the corner, not the worst part of Queens, but far from good, I saw him taking in the neighborhood with professional assessment, noting details, cataloging potential problems the way security people do. Thank you, I said, reaching for the door handle. Please tell Mr. Milani I'm grateful for. He knows. Luca handed me a business card, plain white with just a phone number embossed in black. You need anything at all, you call this number. Understood? I took the card with numb fingers, staring at the simple string of digits. I don't understand why he... Neither do I, Miss Howie. but the boss has his reasons. He always does. Luca's weathered face softened slightly. When the boss gives orders about someone's family, especially about a sick kid, you follow them to the letter. He understands what's at stake. There was something in his tone, not just professional efficiency, but personal understanding. As if he'd seen this before, or experienced something similar himself. I climbed out of the car, watched it pull away into morning traffic, then trudged up 3 flights of stairs to our cramped 1-bedroom apartment. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it yesterday morning. Jeffrey's homework spread on the tiny kitchen table, my work uniform hanging on the bathroom door, the persistent drip of the kitchen faucet I kept meaning to fix. Our life, small and precarious, and held together by sheer stubborn will. I fell onto the pull-out couch bed, still wearing my clothes, too exhausted even to shower properly, and slept for 6 hours of black, dreamless nothing. When I woke, it was early afternoon. I'd slept through most of the morning. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains, and my phone showed 3 missed calls and several texts. 2 calls from the hospital with updates. Jeffrey stable, resting comfortably, responding well to the new medication protocol. 1 call, from an unknown number, time-stamped at 11:23 a.m. There was also a text from that same unknown number, sent while I'd been unconscious with exhaustion. Dr. Sarah Brennan will evaluate Jeffrey tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Best pediatric cardiac surgeon in the country. She's flying in from Boston tonight. Everything is arranged. E.M. I stared at the text, my exhausted brain struggling to process what I was reading. Dr. Sarah Brennan. I knew that name. She'd been featured in a New York Times article about pediatric cardiac surgery 6 months ago. One of the foremost experts in the world. The kind of surgeon with year-long waiting lists and fees that made the surgery itself look cheap. And Hermes Milani had arranged for her to fly in from Boston to evaluate Jeffrey. Tomorrow morning. My phone buzzed in my hand. The unknown number. I answered warily. Miss Howie, Carolyn. The voice was unmistakable, dark honey, Italian accent. The voice from the Lancaster Lounge. Hermes Milani. How is Jeffrey? My mouth went dry. He's stable. They're running more tests, monitoring him closely. Good. Dr. Brennan will be there at 9 a.m. She's bringing a team from Boston Children's Hospital, a pediatric anesthesiologist, a cardiac perfusionist, 2 surgical nurses. They'll do a complete workup, determine the optimal surgical approach and timing. He paused. This isn't a consultation to determine if he needs surgery, Carolyn. It's to determine exactly when and how to give him the best possible outcome. I sat up too fast, the room spinning. Mr. Milani, I can't possibly afford. You misunderstand. This isn't a loan. It's not charity. Consider it. A pause, and I could almost see him leaning back in some expensive chair, choosing his words carefully. An investment. An investment in what? In you, Miss Howie. In your family. In old debts and new possibilities. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. I have a proposition for you. Come to my office tomorrow afternoon, say, 3 o'clock, after Dr. Brennan's consultation. We'll discuss the details. My brother will be kept for observation through tomorrow afternoon. I've already confirmed with Dr. Kapadia. He'll be well cared for, and you'll be back before he wakes from his afternoon rest. Hermes's voice was matter-of-fact, as if orchestrating a child's hospital schedule was routine. You need to understand what I'm offering before you make any decisions. This is too important to discuss over the phone. He gave me an address in Midtown, told me to take a cab and that he'd arrange payment. Bring your questions. I'll provide answers. All of them. And if I refuse to come? A low chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. Then Jeffrey receives the consultation anyway. Dr. Brennan evaluates him, and we part ways. No obligation, but I don't think you'll refuse, Carolyn. Not when you understand what I'm offering. Not when you learn why your family matters to mine. Why does my family matter to yours? Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Some conversations shouldn't happen over the phone. His voice softened slightly. Get some rest, Carolyn. You look exhausted, even though I can't see you. I can hear it in your voice. Sleep. Eat something. Be there for Jeffrey tomorrow morning. Then come see me, and everything will make sense. The line went dead. I sat in the weak afternoon sunlight of my shabby Queens apartment, holding a business card in one hand and a phone in the other, trying to make sense of the last 18 hours. A mafia boss, because that's what he had to be. The whispers were right. Had sent his driver to take me to the hospital. Had that driver wait all night. Had arranged for one of the country's best pediatric cardiac surgeons to fly in from Boston to evaluate my dying brother. And now wanted to meet with me to discuss. What? An investment in my family? Old debts? I should have been terrified. Should have grabbed Jeffrey the moment he was discharged and run as far as we could get from Ermis Milani and whatever dark world he inhabited. But Dr. Kapadia's words kept echoing. Within the next 4 to 6 weeks. Significant risk of sudden cardiac death. I didn't have the luxury of running. I didn't have the luxury of pride or caution or common sense. I had a dying brother and an impossible choice that wasn't really a choice at all. At 2:47 p.m., I texted the unknown number. I'll be there. 3 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you for Dr. Brennan. The response came immediately. See you tomorrow, Carolyn. And you're welcome. E.M. Then, a moment later, a second text. P.S. Eat something. You'll need your strength for tomorrow. I found myself smiling despite everything, a tired, confused, slightly hysterical smile. A mafia boss was monitoring my food intake. The absurdity of it would have made me laugh if I wasn't so exhausted. I ordered Chinese delivery, the first real meal I'd eaten in 36 hours, and tried to sleep. But my mind kept spinning with questions I couldn't answer and decisions I couldn't avoid. Tomorrow, I'd meet with Ermis Milani. Tomorrow, I'd learn what he wanted from me. Tomorrow, my life would change again for better or worse. I couldn't yet tell. The next morning, I arrived at Street Vincent's at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before Dr. Brennan's scheduled consultation. I'd showered, put on clean clothes, even managed to eat toast and coffee before leaving. The small acts of self-care felt strange after months of just surviving. The charge nurse directed me to a conference room on the pediatric floor, where Jeffrey had been moved from emergency to a regular observation room. Your brother had a good night, she told me with a warm smile. The new medications are working well. Dr. Brennan is already here, she's very punctual. Dr. Sarah Brennan was indeed already there. Reviewing files spread across the conference table, a woman in her early 50s, with silver-threaded dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, sharp blue eyes behind rimless glasses, and an air of competent authority that immediately made me want to trust her. She wore scrubs rather than a white coat, and when she shook my hand, her grip was firm and warm. Miss Howie, I'm Sarah Brennan. I've been reviewing Jeffrey's case since 4 this morning, Mr. Milani's office had all his medical records couriered to my hotel last night. She gestured to the chair across from her, where several folders lay open, Jeffrey's medical history, test results, imaging scans. Let me be direct. Your brother needs surgery, but his condition is more manageable than the emergency presentation suggested. The restrictive cardiomyopathy is significant, but he's young, otherwise healthy, and he's responding well to the new medication protocol Dr. Kapadia initiated. How soon does he need it? I asked, the question that had been haunting me since yesterday. 4 to 6 weeks. We need time to optimize his cardiac function with medications. The beta blocker dosage is being increased. We've added an ACE inhibitor to reduce the workload on his heart, and a more effective diuretic to prevent fluid retention. These medications will stabilize him, but they're not a cure. Surgery is the only definitive treatment. Her eyes were kind but unflinching. I'll be honest, Miss Howie, this surgery is complex and expensive. The procedure itself, plus the hospital stay, post-operative care, follow-up appointments, we're talking about $180,000 to $200,000 total cost. The number hit me like a physical blow even though I'd known it was coming. But, Dr. Brennan continued, Mr. Milani's office has made it very clear that cost is not a factor. They've already opened an account at this hospital to cover all of Jeffrey's care, past, present, and future. My only concern is giving your brother the best possible outcome, and I believe we can do that. Why? I whispered. Why would he do this for us? Dr. Brennan's expression was unreadable. I don't ask questions about Mr. Milani's motivations. I've worked with his family's foundation before they're generous benefactors to pediatric cardiac programs across the Northeast, though they keep that philanthropy very quiet. Whatever his reasons, your brother is getting access to the best care available anywhere in the world. She leaned forward slightly. I'd suggest you accept that gift and focus on getting Jeffrey through the next few weeks. Sometimes, when help is offered, the wisest thing to do is take it. She was right, of course. But accepting the gift meant accepting everything that came with it. Dr. Brennan spent the next hour explaining the surgical procedure in detail, a complex operation that would essentially reshape Jeffrey's heart muscle, improving its ability to relax and fill with blood between beats. Her team doctor, Eleni Stavros, a pediatric anesthesiologist, Jonas Lindstrom, a cardiac perfusionist who'd managed the heart-lung machine during surgery, And 2 surgical nurses, both with decades of experience, would run comprehensive tests over the next 2 days before Jeffrey's discharge. "I'm sending home monitoring equipment with you," she said, pulling out a small box containing a pulse oximeter and digital blood pressure monitor. "You'll check his vitals every morning and evening, heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, and log them in an app my team monitors remotely. If anything concerns you, or if the numbers fall outside the parameters we'll give you, you call immediately. We're not taking any chances with Jeffrey." She handed me a detailed medication schedule printed on heavy cardstock. 8 a.m. Metoprolol 50 mg, beta blocker. Lisinopril 10 mg, ACE inhibitor. 12 p.m. Furosemide 20 mg, diuretic. 8 p.m. Metoprolol 50 mg, beta blocker. These times are critical. Set alarms on your phone. Don't miss doses. These medications are keeping him stable until surgery, and no strenuous activity. Light walking is fine, but no running, no gym class, no roughhousing. His heart can't handle the stress right now. After Dr. Brennan left to examine Jeffrey personally, I sat alone in the conference room, staring at the medical equipment and detailed instructions, trying to process how my life had changed so completely in less than 48 hours. At 2:30 p.m., I kissed Jeffrey goodbye. He was sleepy from the new medications, but in surprisingly good spirits, excited about the fancy doctor from Boston, who'd spent an hour examining him and explaining the surgery in terms a 12-year-old could understand. A nurse assured me he'd sleep through the afternoon, that I should go take care of myself for a few hours. The cab ride to Midtown felt surreal. I'd charged it to an account Hermes had set up. The driver had just nodded when I gave the address, not even asking for payment. Apparently, anything related to Hermes Milani's instructions was handled invisibly, efficiently, without question. The glass tower gleamed in the October afternoon sun, all chrome and reflective surfaces, the kind of building that announced wealth and power without needing to say a word. The directory in the marble lobby listed Milani International Imports on the 20th floor, along with half a dozen other companies I didn't recognize. The elevator was glass and chrome, rising smoothly through the building's atrium. I watched the floors tick by, my stomach tightening with each number. At 20, the doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in a modern art gallery. Expensive furniture, abstract paintings, floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of Manhattan that made me dizzy. A receptionist with perfect hair and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent smiled at me with professional warmth. "Miss Howie? Mr. Milani is expecting you. Please, follow me." She led me down a corridor lined with photographs of Italian landscapes, olive groves bathed in golden light, coastal villages clinging to cliffsides, ancient Roman ruins. At the end, she opened a heavy wooden door and gestured me through. The office beyond was massive, dominated by a desk that looked carved from a single piece of dark walnut. Windows on 2 walls flooded the space with afternoon light, and behind the desk, rising from his chair as I entered, was Hermes Milani. He looked different here, in daylight, in this corporate setting, no less dangerous, but somehow more substantial, real. The perfectly tailored suit was charcoal gray today, his shirt open at the collar showing more of those intricate tattoos. I could see what looked like religious imagery, a crowned figure that might have been the Virgin Mary. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he slept as poorly as I did. "Carolyn, thank you for coming." He gestured to a leather chair, positioned in front of his desk. "Please, sit. Can I offer you something? Coffee? Water? Something stronger?" "Water would be good, thank you." My mouth was dry, my hands trembling slightly. He poured from a crystal carafe on a side table, handed me a glass, then settled back into his chair across from me. For a moment, we just looked at each other, him assessing, me trying not to flinch under that dark, intelligent gaze. "Jeffrey's tests came back very promising," he said finally. "Dr. Brennan believes surgery can be scheduled within the 4 to 6 week window. She's optimistic about his prognosis. The condition is serious, but caught in time. With the right surgery and follow-up care, he should have a normal life expectancy." Relief hit me so hard I nearly dropped the water glass. She told me the same thing. "I don't know how to thank you for arranging." "Don't thank me yet." He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "We need to discuss what comes next. This consultation, the monitoring, the medications, that's all handled, no strings attached. But the surgery itself, the hospital stay, the recovery, the ongoing care Jeffrey will need, That's more complicated. Because it costs $180,000. Because it represents a significant investment on my part. And I need you to understand what I'm offering and what I'm asking in return. His eyes never left mine. This conversation deserves a better setting than this corporate office. Come. He stood, moving around the desk with fluid grace. I followed him out of the office, down the corridor, to an executive conference room I hadn't noticed before. It was smaller, more intimate, with a round table and comfortable chairs. The same floor-to-ceiling windows showing Manhattan spread out below us like a chessboard. He gestured for me to sit, then settled into the chair that would have been the head if round tables had heads. Better, more private. He opened a folder he'd brought with him. Now, let me tell you about your father, Carolyn. Let me tell you why your family matters to mine, and why I'm willing to do what I'm about to propose. My heart hammered. My father? He pulled out a photograph, old, faded, the colors washed out with age. Two men stood in front of a warehouse, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. One was older, maybe 40, with dark hair and sharp features. The other was younger, perhaps 23, with a brilliant smile and dark curly hair. Papa, I whispered. Your father, Tommaso Cucinotta, before he Americanized the surname to Howie, worked for my father, Domenico Milani, in Palermo from 1994 to 1997. This photo was taken in 1995. Hermes's voice was softer now, almost reverent. Your father was 23 then. My father was 42. They were close, more than employer and employee. In our world, in that life, you don't survive without people you trust, absolutely. My father trusted yours with his life. I stared at the photograph, my father's young face smiling up at me, completely unaware of what was coming. If he was 23 in 1995, he'd have been born in 1972. He was 27 when I was born in October 1999, 49 when he died in July 2021. A whole life lived, most of it spent trying to leave this world behind. What happened? I asked quietly. Hermes took a slow breath. In early 1996, your father witnessed a meeting he wasn't supposed to see. 3 members of a rival family, the Calabrese organization, met with one of my father's captains, planning a coup. They were going to eliminate my father, take over his operations, absorb his territory. It would have been a massacre, not just my father, but his entire inner circle, their families, everyone. His jaw tightened. Your father overheard the meeting by accident. He was supposed to be at the docks that night, but he came back to the warehouse for something he'd forgotten. He heard everything, and he had a choice: stay silent, stay safe, or warn my father and become a target. He warned him. He did more than that. He agreed to testify before the family council, a gathering of all the Sicilian family bosses in the region. His testimony prevented the coup, exposed the traitors. My father survived, our family survived. But your father... Hermes paused. Within 24 hours, the Calabrese put a contract on his head. $500,000 liar. Every assassin in Sicily was looking for him. I felt sick. What did your father do? Got him out. False papers, new identity, cash to start over. Your father became Thomas Howie, fled to America with your mother Maria. She was already pregnant with you. You were born here, in Brooklyn, October 1999. Safe. American. Free of the life your father had left behind. Hermes reached for another document, a death certificate. My father's. The 15th of July, 2021. Car accident on the Taconic Parkway. When I saw this, when I learned that Tommaso had died, I looked deeper. Found you and Jeffrey. Found out about his heart condition, about your situation, and I thought about the debt my family owed yours. So this is about obligation. It started that way, he admitted. When I saw your name on the Kensington Club's employee records 8 months ago, I was curious. Howie isn't obviously Italian. But I researched, found the connection. I've been aware of you since February, Carolyn. Aware. Not actively watching, there's a difference. And when you heard me speak, Sicilian, I knew for certain. The Palermo dialect isn't something you learn from an app or a college course. It's passed down through families, through stories and songs and daily life. Hearing you speak it, seeing your fear for Jeffrey, he leaned forward. It confirmed everything. You're Tommaso's daughter. You carry his strength, his loyalty, his willingness to sacrifice everything for family. What do you want from me? I asked bluntly. He slid a new folder across the table, a formal employment contract, professionally printed and bound. I need a housekeeper, someone who can cook traditional Sicilian food, maintain my home, create a space that feels like more than just a showpiece. I have an estate in Westchester, a main house, and a guest cottage. You and Jeffrey would live in the cottage, complete privacy, your own space. I stared at the contract. You want me to be your maid. I want you to make my house feel like a home, he corrected. The salary is triple what you make at the Kensington. Comprehensive medical coverage for both of you, not just Jeffrey's surgery, but everything. Ongoing care, medications, follow-up appointments. For life. Why me? You could hire professional household staff with years of experience. Because you speak Sicilian. Because you understand the culture I came from, even if you've lived most of your life in America. Because I can trust you. His eyes held mine. Your father proved his loyalty to my family at tremendous cost. That kind of loyalty runs in families. I see it in how you've cared for Jeffrey, how you've held your life together against impossible odds. I need someone like that in my home. And the medical coverage includes everything. Jeffrey's surgery, Dr. Brennan's fees, the hospital, all post-operative care. The medications he'll need to take for years, cardiology appointments. If he needs anything, it's covered. The only cost to you is this job. This seems too good to be true. There has to be more to it. There is. Hermes didn't flinch from the truth. You'd be living in my world, Carolyn. My home. You'd see things, hear things, understand things about my business that most people never know. You need to understand what that means before you agree to anything. He stood, moving to the windows, hands clasped behind his back. I told you my legitimate business is import-export. That's true. Milani International Imports brings in Italian goods, olive oil, wine, marble, luxury items. We generate millions in legitimate profit. But I also control port operations in New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia. I facilitate shipments for various organizations. Some of those shipments are legal. Some exist in gray areas. Some are explicitly illegal. You're telling me you're in the mafia. He turned to face me. I'm a boss in a Sicilian crime family that's been operating in New York for 3 generations. My father ran it before me. His father before him. We control territory. We manage interests that range from legitimate business to organized crime. We have relationships with politicians and judges and police. And yes, sometimes people get hurt. Sometimes worse than hurt. The brutal honesty should have sent me running. But I appreciated it more than pretty lies. Your father knew this world, Hermes continued. Left it to protect you from it. And here I am, asking you to step back into it. Not as a participant, but as someone who lives adjacent to it. You'd be in my home. You'd overhear conversations. You'd see people come and go. You'd understand more than almost anyone outside my organization. And you'd expect me to be silent about it. I'd expect you to be discreet, loyal, and smart about what you see and hear, the same way your father was. His eyes held mine. I won't lie to you, Carolyn. This life has dangers. I have enemies, people who'd love to hurt me, and who might try to hurt those close to me to accomplish that. But I also have power, resources, and a ruthless commitment to protecting what's mine. If you and Jeffrey are under my roof, you're under my protection, and I protect what's mine. I thought about Dr. Capadia's words, 4 to 6 weeks. Sudden cardiac death. I thought about my bank account with less than $4,000. I thought about Jeffrey's face when I'd told him about Dr. Brennan, the hope I'd seen there for the first time in months. If I accept, when would this start? Jeffrey is being discharged tomorrow morning. Dr. Brennan wants him in a stable environment, carefully monitored until surgery. The cottage would be ready by tomorrow afternoon. You could move in immediately. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming even in this spacious room. But I need you to understand something. This isn't temporary. If you accept, if you bring Jeffrey into my home, you're not just an employee. You become part of my household, part of what I protect. There's no casual exit from that. You mean we can't just leave whenever we want? I mean that once you're under my protection, leaving makes you vulnerable. My enemies would notice, would see you as leverage against me, even if you're no longer in my house. So if you agree to this, you need to understand it's not for a few months or a year. It's permanent, or as permanent as these things can be. The weight of the decision pressed down on me. Accept, and Jeffrey would live. We'd be safe, protected, provided for. But we'd also be bound to this man, to his world, to whatever darkness existed in the shadows of his empire. Refuse. And Jeffrey would likely die within months. and I'd spend the rest of my life knowing I could have saved him but chose pride over pragmatism. I need to think about it, I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. Of course. He returned to the table, pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. My personal number. Call me anytime, day or night. You have until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to decide. If you accept, a car will pick you up at noon to take you and Jeffrey to the estate. If you refuse. He paused. The consultation with Dr. Brennan stands. The medications, the monitoring, those are already handled. But the surgery itself would be up to you to fund, which meant it wouldn't happen. Which meant Jeffrey would die. We both knew it. The choice was an illusion. Thank you for your honesty, I said, standing on shaking legs. For telling me the truth instead of pretending this is something it's not. You deserve the truth. Your father valued honesty even when it was painful. I assume his daughter does too. He walked me to the door, his hand at the small of my back, a gesture that should have felt presumptuous but somehow felt protective. One more thing, Carolyn. Your father didn't just save my father's life. He taught our family that loyalty means something. That honor exists even in our world. You carry that same quality. That's why I want you in my home, not because of an old debt, but because you're worthy of protection in your own right. I left his office in a daze, rode the elevator down in silence, walked out into the October afternoon with my mind spinning. The cab ride back to the hospital was a blur. I sat with Jeffrey through the evening, watching him sleep peacefully, his heart rhythm steady on the monitors thanks to medications I could never have afforded without Hermes Milani's intervention. That night, back in our cramped Queens apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with the contract and a pen, reading every clause, every condition, every promise, written in formal legal language. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I knew who it was before I opened the message. Your father once told mine that the hardest choices are between two goods, not between good and evil. Choose life for Jeffrey. Everything else, we'll figure out together. EM. Below it, a second message, a screenshot, clearly forwarded by accident or perhaps deliberately. Don't lose sight of her. She's important. EM. The message was sent to someone else. About me. An instruction to his people. I sat in the fluorescent quiet of our apartment, listening to the neighbor's TV through thin walls, the drip of the kitchen faucet, the distant sirens of the city that never slept. I thought about my father, who'd fled this world so I wouldn't have to know it. I thought about Jeffrey, asleep in the bedroom, his heart slowly failing. I thought about Hermes Milani, with his cold eyes and unexpected gentleness, his brutal honesty, and his promises of protection. At 11:53 p.m., I picked up the pen and signed the contract. At 11:54 p.m., I took a photo and texted it to the unknown number. At 11:55 p.m., my phone rang. Carolyn. His voice was warm, relieved. You won't regret this. I already do, I said honestly. But Jeffrey won't die. That's what matters. That's what matters, he agreed. The car will be at your building at noon tomorrow. Pack what you need. Everything else, furniture, clothes, whatever Jeffrey needs we'll handle. Hermes. Yes. Don't make me regret this more than I already do. A pause. Then, quietly. I'll try not to. Welcome home, Carolyn. The line went dead. I sat alone in the dark apartment. Contract signed. Decision made. Life irrevocably changed. And somehow, despite everything, I felt lighter than I had in 2 years. The crushing weight of impossible responsibility had shifted, shared now with someone who promised protection and seemed to mean it. Tomorrow, we'd leave Queens. Tomorrow, we'd enter Hermes Milani's world. Tomorrow, Jeffrey would have a real chance at life. Everything else, the danger, the compromises, the darkness I was walking into would have to be dealt with as it came. For now, I'd made the only choice I could live with. I'd chosen Jeffrey's life, and whatever came after, I'd face it. If you've made it to the end and haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect time to become part of this family. Also, do tell me in the comments what struck you most about the story. What was the greatest lesson it left you? I try to read all the comments, and I love knowing how these stories move you. Finally, I just want to say, thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed it, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and even more intriguing than you can ever imagine. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.